Robert Haynes. You may notice me from the show before, Watch House. I was on that. Yes, this is the same person.
This is just
And
all
I'm
you do.
excited. It is today. The Game House's channel should just be named Robert's channel. All jokes aside, I've got Chris and Nick here with me. Welcome, guys. Glad to have you on.
Good evening, Robert. It is good to see you after your absence last week.
I apologize. I had to go to the Sin City. Had to go to Vegas, so had to get ready for the not craziness that was this weekend. So it's a good weekend, but we didn't do anything crazy. There were crazy things that happened.
It's what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. That's what they say, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that needs to stay in Vegas, but there are some things you guys will want to hear after the show that aren't appropriate that were hilarious. So, we'll talk about that later. Nick, how are you doing, bud?
I am good. Excited for another weekend of playoffs coming up, to be honest.
Yeah, dude. It's going to be crazy. We saw some pretty good games, depending on who you were rooting for last weekend. And the picks are already in for this weekend. Who's going to be playing who? I don't think any of us are really surprised by that. But we'll get started by recapping the first games from last week. Clutch was able to dismantle TSM 3-1. It was not a fun game. I actually took a nap during game 2 because I was tired, and it was so bad for me as a TSM fan, because they were losing within the first 5 minutes, so I was pretty upset about that. Let's kind of like break this down here. Chris, we'll start with you. What did you see in this game? Like, what went wrong for TSM and what went right for Clutch?
Team Solo Mid, we talked about this a little bit last week on the show. I honestly just don't think that they're that good of a team. Period. Right? Like, if you look at the games and you look at kind of a comprehensive view of the team as a whole, they don't do a lot of things really well. Their early game, their laning phases aren't that well. They brought in a new jungler to try to, improve their communication or improve some of those early deficits they were getting into. And it just was bad. But I mean, on the flip side of that, I have to give a lot of credit to Clutch Gaming.
Yeah.
I thought they played a good series. Like, they understood what their win conditions were, and they played to those win conditions. Even in games when they got down a bit, there was a massive team fight at what was it, the Scuttler or Baron that Demonte had like that huge ultimate on and totally changed kind of the face of the game there, and they just kept rolling from that. So I think, TSM, we could talk about the things that they did wrong and, looking towards Gauntlet, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But I just want to take a second and congratulate Clutch Gaming, because I thought that they played a good series. And I had said, I thought that they were more of a best of 1 team than a best of 5 team, but they were able to put it together consistently over the whole series.
Yeah. Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just it. I wasn't surprised, despite my prediction going to TSM, because I think we all felt like Clutch could beat TSM. I think it was just we weren't sure if they could do it, 3 games. And they've been a team that's been hit or miss, and they were just hitting. They were doing it. It wasn't, I kind of thought they'd come out of the gate swinging, and then TSM would figure them out, and they just didn't figure them out. They had this relatively new lineup. They did get the Baron steal, which I think we should talk about. He's had 2 in his first 3 pro games. But yeah, I mean, Clutch stepped up and stayed more consistent than I expected him to, and that's all it took, really.
Yeah, I think it's worth discussing what the catalyst for Clutch has been, because they were not a very good team up until these last couple weeks, and I think TSM really epitomizes where they've come from. And I think a lot of this has to do with a friend of Game Haus in Cody Sun. We did not, sorry to spoil, we're going to be releasing all of our all-pro votes tomorrow, by the way. So make sure to check out the Game Haus. You'll see how we voted for every single lane and position. And Cody Sun did not get voted on as high. And I think I've got a quote in there talking about the fact that he probably should have been voted higher, but I just don't think that, with the lack of playing time that he had beforehand and, the time it took for him to get together, we just didn't have enough information. But that said, I think we saw what Clutch was able to do with Cody Sun in this game. And I think most importantly, what they were able to do was allow Lyra to make more of an impact for DeMonte and for Hooney. Because of the fact that Cody Sun could hold his own in the bot lane, where we would have thought a couple weeks ago that TSM would have the advantage, it was at least dead even, if not going towards Clutch in that matchup. And it allowed Lyra to do some other things that he wasn't able to do, and take advantage of being more aggressive and just a better jungler than Spica was. So, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, do you guys feel like there were players that had more of an impact for Clutch? Hooney looked solid. Damonte looked really good. Lyra looked, better than he had. Who was it for you guys that you thought really brought out this new Clutch that we're seeing?
Well, I know that Chris wasn't a huge fan of Cody Sun because I sent him a message all excited about Cody Sun and he shut me down. And it was a fair point. I mean, Cody Sun, it wasn't the best League of Legends performance that's ever happened. He played solid, he played safe, he didn't die, and he did a ton of damage at the end. And I don't think that makes him the best player of all time after these games, but I think that he did what he had to do. And I mean, in this situation, looking at his stats, he was like, peak reckless numbers of just like doing the late damage, farming up, and not dying. And that's exactly what they needed.
Cody Sun got a lot of praise in this series, and I'm not saying he didn't have a good series, right? Like that's not what I'm saying. But Cody Sun to me wasn't the star, right? He did his job, right? Like his job was he got put on hyperscaling players or hyperscaling champions. He played Sivir 3 games, and he played Kaisa in the last one. And just like Nick said, his job is not to die, right? Like just farm. I don't think Sven and Smoothie are that oppressive of laners to play against either. No. So it's, people talk about how he didn't die, and that's true. You should play safe. But at some point, Sivir outscales everybody. Like, that's just how it goes. And also, Kaisa is a very hyper-scaling player, too. Or champion, too. To me, well, first the point, Lyra looked clearly like he was the better player than Spica did. And
a given.
That was in pretty much every game. But to me, the shining light for this series was DeMonte. And he had some highlight plays, that's true. And I think it's really, extra impressive when you take into the factor that he's playing against Bjergsen, right? Who's supposed to be the best mid laner, maybe one of the best overall players in the LCS. So when you put it on that level, right, not only did he have a standout performance, but did it against somebody who's considered probably the best in his role. To me, that just makes it even more impressive that DeMonte had the series that he did.
Yeah, I get what you're saying with that, and I do think that DeMonte held Bjerg in check, which is what they needed to do. And I think that was a pretty major part of their win condition. Don't let Bjerg get ahead. And while Bjerg had the best games for anybody on TSM outside of Sven having a really good game in Game 3, I think you're really underselling what Cody Sun did. Over those 4 games, he went 24, 2, and 24. Right? Like, I get what you're saying, but that is incredible. That's not just not dying. That is absolutely making it so that there is no doubt for Clutch that they have to worry about that lane or that position at all. None. Like, he's going to do what he's going to do. And I think that Reckless is a great comparison. And I think that while it may not be flashy, and it may just be that he's doing his job, I don't think that you can understate how important that is to a team like Clutch, who's known for just throwing games. He is that consistency. He is that foundation for the team, in my opinion, that allows Hooney to maybe make a mistake, or Lyra to make a couple mistakes, or DeMonte to only play to keep Bjerg where he needs to be. And I don't think that can be understated in the plays that he made. And I know it's not all about the numbers. I like to point to the numbers because I don't think, not us specifically, I think the three of us do a good job of it, but I think in league in general, a lot of people in a game that has a lot of numbers sometimes ignore how those numbers come about. So um, I cannot say I agree with you on the Cody Sun part, but I will agree. I think Demonte was really good. I think this might be something that showed, at least to me, that he is truly deserving of an LCS spot. I had not been convinced before. I had been worried that he was somebody who they would need to replace early on in the split, and now I think he has cemented himself as absolutely one of the better players even on Clutch, if not the best player on Clutch.
And I think there's something to be said for just doing your job. I mean, I think, it's arguable that having a consistent player who's doing their job, like an ADC who's farming and scaling and getting all their kills at the end of the game, is better than having somebody who does flashy stuff but then also dies a lot, like Spica. And I'm not trying to talk trash about him. He's brand new. I can't imagine the pressure of just starting, for TSM and then going right into the playoffs. But he had some awesome Baron steals, but then he also messed up a lot, and that's kind of how the whole series went. And Clutch settled in and did their jobs, and it's not crazy and flashy, but it worked, and it got them to the semis. So
I'm not saying Cody Sun did not have a good series. I think he very much did, right? But I don't think that the people he was running against are people who are going to run them over. Either way, Zen and Smoothie are not going to take it to you. And I think that while he had a great series or a good series, like I said, I was just more impressed with what Demonte was able to do against Bjergsen versus what Cody Sun and Vulcan were able to do against Sven and Smoothie. And you know what? I mean, Cody Sun's he's coming off a good series, and luckily for him, he's going to get to prove himself, or unlucky for him, in the next series because he's going to go against the best.
Yeah.
Which is Doublelift and Core JJ. And they will pressure you. They will kill you in lane if you mess up. So we'll see how that goes for them, because that could be a key factor to the series. If Cody Sun is able to hold them, if Cody Sun and Vulcan are able to hold them at bay, I still think Jensen's a better player than Demonte is. And I still think that Dig Smithy's a better player than Lyra is. Lyra's very hit and miss. I just think Spica played into Lyra's style, in my opinion, because Lyra's a person who will punish you when you're making mistakes. And Smithy doesn't make very many mistakes, right? Like, that's just not his thing. He's smart about his vision. He's smart about where he is on the map and what the other jungler is doing. So Lyra, I don't think is going to be able to have nearly as good of a series as he was able to have against Spica. So, like I said, to me, star of the series was Demonte, and that's purely because he was able to do it against Bjergsen. You're right, there were games where he was just needing to hold kind of Bjergsen at bay, but there were also games where he carried, which is impressive in itself. So Cody Sun, good series. Lots of people on Clutch had a good series. Huni had an underrated series too. He looked good against Broken Blade, although Broken Blade has looked bad pretty much the whole split. Just as a whole, Clutch Gaming looked good.
Yeah.
And it's also easy to look at stats and say, well, they had this impressive, awesome KDA. When you 3-1 people, of course, the winning team tends to have the better KDA. So,
but not that good.
Well, I mean but once again, he's playing on a very safe hyper scaling champion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if TSM had played the way they should have, they would have gotten to him, and they didn't. Spica missed. I counted at least 6 ultimates on Sejuani that could have been absolutely game changing in, I think, the first 3 games. I mean, they basically only played him, I think, on Sejuani. So I
think he played a Jarvan game too.
Yeah, I think the last game was Jarvan. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that TSM executed, because had they been able to, they didn't execute. And I think had they been able to get onto Cody Sun and put the pressure on him, I still think he would have had a good series. But he was always putting himself in a good position. He was dodging a lot of things. He did spell shield when he needed to. And he did play safe, but I think that that's kind of what they wanted him to do. We've seen him pop off. And they basically were like, we need to just take advantage of this jungler. We're not going to worry. We don't want to worry about you guys in the bot lane. Just do your thing down there. And TSM just didn't convert. They just never, it never felt like they ever had control of any objective while Spica was playing during this series. I just remember watching dragon after dragon go down. Like, I mean, I'd love to check it. I'm pretty sure. Let's see here. TSM 1 dragon, 2, 1, 1. All right, so it was 3, 6, 8, 12. It was 12 dragons in the game to 5. It was most of the towers. I think TSM got 2 barons, both on steals, if I remember correctly. And outside of their win, TSM didn't get a single inhibitor. They just never had control. They never had control of the game, and I think that mostly falls on their jungler. And the sad thing is Spica just wasn't ready, and Lyra took advantage of it. And Cody's son played smart, and Demonte played smart, and Huni, weirdly enough, played smart. Rarely do we see that, but he played. I think I saw Huni's 4 best game of League of Legends in the last 2 years potentially. So
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to look good against Broken Blade, though. So
throwing shade. Come on. We'll go into TSM.
Summer Split, Broken Blade.
we'll go on to TSM another time, maybe during the off season a little bit more.
A special
Definitely
TSM episode.
We'll have the gauntlet coming up here.
Yeah,
This is not the last we will see of TSM. We get to the treat of watching them lose one more series, and then we'll.
Well, let's be fair though. They may end up only having to win one series to get into Worlds. So we'll see how the rest of this playoffs go. And with that, we're gonna jump into what I think will be an even easier conversation. Sadly, CLG versus Optic. CLG won pretty handily, 3-0. None of these games really looked close, honestly. I think CLG have really shown just how good they can be and are. They don't screw around with teams that are just frankly not as good as them. And I don't even think we saw half of what the true power of, CLG really is going to be. I think we're going to see that this week. But let's break down the series at least a little bit. What went right for Optic or for CLG? What went wrong for Optic? Are there any bright moments, plays, anything that we can really take from these CLG Optic games for Optic? Let's start over there.
So I think game 1, Optic should have won. They were in a pretty clear position to win the game, and they flubbed it. And they had the same issue, I think it was 2 weeks ago, with Team Liquid, where they acquired a decent-sized late game, like mid to late game lead, and they just couldn't finish them off. Which to me is encouraging, on one hand, because you're able to get in this position to win the game, but discouraging on the other hand that you didn't win the game. So that was the game to me. Like, if they had won that game, you would have had a very different series. That is a very mentally taxing game to lose because you're winning, you've got their inhibitors down, like you're in a position to win the game, and then all of a sudden you make a couple mistakes in a row and you've like the game's over. Like you lose a team fight and they kill one of your other players in their base, and CLG just uses the death timers to finish you off. And at that point, I think the series was over. Optic Gaming, we all pretty much agreed they were, pretty heavy underdogs coming into this game or the series, and they had the opportunity to win that first game, gain the momentum, kind of move forward. They let it slip through their fingers, and I think that was all she wrote for the series. You kind of saw it in the second and third games. They just looked like a defeated team at that point. So for me, Optic Gaming flashed the potential that they've had, but they've also showed that they're just not quite there yet. Like, they, as a team, whether it's, I don't know if it's communication issues, I don't know if it's shot calling mistakes, but there's something that's not allowing them to get that last third of the game to go cleanly or smoothly for them.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, they had 4 barons. You lose the game that you have 4 barons, that is going to absolutely break your back. And I do apologize. I forgot that this game was as close as it was. So when I said it wasn't close, outside of game 1. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who tries to, I do a lot of like teaching, new people to play. I've coached, and you always go back to like this isn't a game about kills. It's a game about objectives, and if you get more towers and more dragons and more barons and more inhibitors, like you should win. And
Mhm.
this game is not one that I would point to with this point because Optic did all that and they just weren't able to finish it out. And, um, I think that still points to CLG being the better team. The better team isn't always going to win the early game. Things happen, mistakes get made, even the best teams, that happens. But those good teams will draw the game out because it gets to a point
Yeah.
where that stuff matters less and less. And, everybody has full builds, everything is buffed, and you just have to win one team fight and end the game. That's exactly what CLG did. They knew that. They knew they just had to wait until they, slowly close that gap. And they pulled through. And all that matters is whose nexus goes down first. And they really played to that. And I think you're right. I think after Optic fought that long and that hard and had that advantage and lost it, they just didn't have the spirit to do anything for the rest of the series.
Well,
And it's too bad. But
you gotta wonder why that is when you have a team like CLG that doesn't really have. I mean, they have leadership. They've got veterans on the team, but so does Optic. I mean, you've
mhm.
got Crown, you've got Meteos, you've got Arrow, right? Like they all have a lot of experience in this game. And the fact that they couldn't bounce back is kind of surprising. I was looking at this game again. I'm like, maybe it's just that CLG outscaled, but Optic had Corki and Ezreal, like
Mhm.
two really good scaling champions for the late game. And yeah, I think what I had been teaching when I was teaching League of Legends as well to some students at a local high school, I taught them similarly. You turn objectives into kills, right? Or the opposite, you turn kills into objectives.
Mhm.
You got to be able to play one way, and it depends on how it goes in the early game, what your comp is, all that jazz. And I think I'm surprised that Optic couldn't seem to figure it out later on. They even had some pretty nice drafts. I liked their draft in the second game. Getting Dokla his Aatrox, I would have thought would have been a huge key for them. Meteos has played Trundle really well. Putting Crown on Silas is fantastic. Draven Morgana bottom lane, like right, like you see a really nice draft like that, and they just don't convert.
Mhm.
And I don't think, Chris, that it can be narrowed down to one thing. I'm still of the opinion that Dokla and Big are pretty much near the bottom of their respective positions. I do think that is hurting this team, and it'll be interesting to see as Optic turns into Immortals next year, what contracts are kept. What's going to happen with this team. Now we do get to see them, I believe, in Gauntlet, if I remember
No,
correctly.
you
Or no,
don't.
no, no, that you don't.
They got
You're
knocked out.
right. You're right. They got knocked out because they didn't get to the next round. So you won't see. This is the last time you'll see Optic Gaming in the LCS. So kind of a disappointing way to go out. We've talked enough about them. I think CLG. Yeah, I think they're scary, man. It kind of terrifies me how scary they might actually end up being. Being able to come back from a game like that is really good, but the rolling that they gave on game 2 or 3, I mean, they still could have thrown some stuff. I think that they had some good drafts in games 2 and 3 as well. Um, was a little surprised to see the Camille come out on Ruin, honestly, but he made it work. And I think that talks a lot about what Weldon has done for this team. And I think personally, he is the cog in this machine that makes them go. Um, and I wanted to get your guys' kind of thoughts on CLG before we move on to these next two games.
So I guess I'll start a little bit. Game one, the ability to hold off Optic, and you can put that on Optic for not being able to finish, but you can also say that CLG was able to fight through it. That's the impressive thing to me, right? Like winning the games that you should lose, that's a big trait to have.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that told me a lot about where this team is as a team. Um, they have veteran players in their team. Wiggly's younger, but he's been around the League of Legends scenes, even though he's been in an academy and things like that. Ruin has played professionally overseas. So, I really think that moment, that game told me that that's we're here for real and we're actually a good team moment. I really liked their game 2 draft. I thought it was fantastic. For what Optic was throwing at them, the ability, the disengage and the spacing ability of that composition would have made it very, very hard for Optic to have a successful team fight later in the game. If the game had been even, it would have been very hard for the frontliners to get in. And with champions like Varus and Power of Evil, I mean, they just can shred you from kind of that medium distance. So I really liked the draft in game 2. Game 3, they just look clean. You put the Caitlyn Morgana lane, which is a very strong lane. If you happen to catch somebody with a binding, it just goes bad for them very quickly.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, they flexed a bunch of different ways to win games in just a 3-game series. So it'll be interesting to see how the Cloud9 series goes. I know Cloud9 kind of pounded them in their tiebreaker, but that's one game. Best of 5 series, I think, are a completely different beast. Just for the example of, look at that game 1 and then look at the games 2 and games 3 and how different they were versus the game 1.
I would agree. Nick, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I really took away from it was just how many different places they could carry from. I mean, the first game is the first game. It was kind of a slugfest. They still had 4 times as many kills. The KDAs were still really good. They were losing objectives, but they still managed to come back. But game 2, we had both Ruin and Power of Evil kind of popping off. Game 3, Stixxay carried like he can. Stixxay on that Caitlyn is real fun to watch. And we talked about that last week too, where CLG can really flex and adapt and carry from any position. And I think that's why they have done and will continue to do well in these longer series. If somebody's having an off day, depending on the team you're playing, if somebody gets countered or is facing a tough lane, like they can adjust as well as any team out there, and kind of spearhead from a different lane. And so I think that's going to carry them well. I know we're not getting into predictions yet, but I think they're going to keep doing well.
Yeah, and no, you're right. We will get into predictions with that. We will move into tomorrow's game. CLG and Cloud9 will be battling it out. Cloud9, getting the opportunity to get that free bye week by beating CLG just 2 weeks ago in their tiebreaker game. Let's first talk about Cloud9 because we haven't had a chance to do that. Then we'll jump into our predictions. Cloud9 have had a really interesting split. They went to Rift Rivals. They had like half their team sick. They've had Licorice with a nagging injury, all split long. And they've lost some weird games that they shouldn't have lost. Yet they still finished second. Everybody seems to still have confidence in them. What is giving you guys confidence right now? Not that you're predicting Cloud9, but what gives you confidence in C9 when you look at this team?
I mean, to me, they have a really interesting mix of experience and new talent. Licorice is relatively new and has been one of the big American top laners. Svenskeren, sneaky, can carry you a long way. Niski has been a surprise to most people this season. Really, really played well. I mean, I don't know. I'm a big fan of Zazel. Maybe it's because I'm a support main with a beard, but they have the talent. They have a solid team, and they've had to deal with more than most teams. This split. Probably the only team that was shaken up more was 100 Thieves. With all their shuffles, but they dealt with a lot this season. They dealt with a lot the previous season. With bringing in all the academy players and all the stuff they did that took them on their big run. And I think I think that speaks to the org. I think that speaks to the coach, and just the attitude of the players to kind of roll with that many changes and keep being as successful as they are. And so, I think they're one of those teams that you can't really count out. They might not have the raw talent of a Team Liquid. They might not have quite the flexibility of a CLG, but they have something working for them. It's been working for them for a long time through several iterations of a lineup, and I think it's something that you kind of have to respect.
I think Cloud9 is really the antithesis of Team Liquid in a lot of ways, and that where Team Liquid shines in its bottom lane, that's the big question mark for Cloud9 moving forward is can Sneaky, can Zazel keep up? Licorice, when he's healthy, might be the best top laner in the LCS.
Mm-hmm.
You have Niski, who's had really a breakout split, and Svenskaren's been solid, right? Like, people are talking about him as an MVP candidate. So, are we looking forward to the matchup versus CLG? Because I really, for me, and just to put it on one person, right? The big spotlight for me is on Sneaky. And he's been around for a long time. There's been times where he's taken a break. He's been benched. They had Deathly play for a little bit. Can Sneaky keep Cloud9 in a position to win this series? That's the big question for me. Stixay and Biofrost, I think, have proven. They showed it in the last series. Arrow's no slouch, right? And Stixay had a great series. So I really think that's the big question mark for me. Cloud9. I'll get to my prediction here in a bit, but I think most people probably think that they're the second best team or very close with CLG to be that second best team in North America. And I'm excited. Like, this to me, it's unfortunate that, without giving away too much of what I think will happen, I think after this is all said and done and we get to Detroit next week, I think the first, second place teams, there's going to be a bit of a distance between the two of them. And I think the third and the fourth place team, there's going to be a bit of a distance between the two of them. Because I really think that you have a definite top 3 tier. And I think that between Cloud9 and CLG, I think they're very close. They're closer than the other two, the Clutch Gaming and Team Liquid.
Okay. Absolutely. Then I think with that, I'll say this for Cloud9. I think between the way that they play and the way that Reaper drafts for them, and the belief that they have in themselves, which is cheesy and stupid potentially, but it is something that they have. They do have confidence in themselves. I think for me, this whole year has been an absolute. I think Breakout doesn't even really explain how good Niski has been in Jensen's absence. I think at times Niski has looked better than Jensen this whole season, personally. And I know that Chris and I disagree on that. We've talked about it before.
We've had this discussion. This was like a 20-minute discussion.
and I think when it comes down to it, it's going to be an incredible series. And I think that Cloud9 may surprise us in different ways. I think they're one of the only, I think everybody's bringing subs, but I think they're the only team that may actually use their subs in a best of 5 series. I think most of it will depend on how Licorice feels, because I think they brought Kumo and Deftly, I think, right? Are those their 2 players they brought?
Or what about Blabber?
I don't think they brought Blabber.
You can bring 3 though, right? Because TSM had 3.
I thought you could only bring. No, because TSM only brought Spica.
No, they had Spica, Treats, and Tactical.
Oh, did they? Okay,
yeah.
I didn't even know about Tactical. Okay. Well, then I guess they did bring Blabber. I don't think they'll play Blabber unless if they really feel like they need a big change of pace from Svenskeren. But
that would be a
maybe
huge
Sneaky
surprise.
will be sick again. Blabber's got to step in.
Ugh, no, I think they got deftly for that reason. That trade, by the way, is looking like an absolutely genius trade for C9. We'll see what happens with Sneaky.
FBI looked good though.
FBI looks great, but I'm still saying that Cloud9 are going to win that trade because
I mean,
Golden Guardians was supposed to start Keith. FBI was like, nah, that ain't gonna happen.
It's like fantasy football trades, right? How important are they if you don't end up starting them?
Yeah, no, it's the truth. It is the truth. So let's jump into predictions. Nick, I'm going to start with you. What are your official predictions for the Cloud9 CLG game, and just tell us why?
So before we do this, though, we have a point system going.
Oh yes, that's right.
And last week we gave 2 points to the winner and a bonus point if you were able to correctly predict the score in addition to the winner. As of right now, the standings are myself with 4 points for correctly predicting that CLG would win, and that being the only person to predict Clutch Gaming would prevail. Nick and I were messaging. He was ready for the reverse sweep. It just didn't happen for him. He actually predicted the reverse sweep, so I'm like, oh man, this guy's gonna look like a genius.
I know. I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, you watch. If they do this, I'm gonna be so famous.
That's a smart strategy, because if it doesn't work out, you're just like, well, I took a risk. But if it works out, you're like, see, I'm a genius, right?
I knew it all along.
Absolutely.
So we had talked about upping the points for consecutive rounds. Now, do we want to do that, or do we want to keep them the way it was? The 2 points for a correct and the 1 bonus point for the correct score.
I'm all in.
You guys decide.
Let's up it. Let's go.
More.
Let's up it. Okay, yeah. I'm down. We'll do it.
All right.
So we'll do 3 points for the victory, 1 point for predicting the correct score.
Okay. So I wish there was a better way to do this, and I don't think there is. But it's always tough because the final scoreline of a series doesn't always indicate how close the games are. You can have, a 3-0 series where each of the games was really close. You can have a 3-2 series where the games were really varied. It's not always really lined up, but I feel like that's kind of what we use as an indicator that the series is going to be close. And so that being said, I'm going to say CLG 3-2 because I don't think either team is a team that you can count out. I think that I'm expecting a really good series. I'm expecting flexibility from both teams. I'm expecting, 2 teams that are in a good place mentally, that are going to be coming to this on a positive note. And I think it's going to be, I think this might be one of the best series of the split.
Okay. Aren't you a C9 fan?
I don't know, man. It's so hard. I've actually I've always said that I'm probably a CLG fan. It's hard to pick. I've always really liked the team. One of my best friends who really got me into the LCS is a big CLG fan, so I've always kind of followed them. So, I've always I like Biofrost. I like Stixay. Like I like the team. But all personal bias aside, I think they're going to be able to pull it out, but I don't think it'll be easy.
Okay, interesting. All right. Chris, I'm going to give you second dibs here. What do you got?
All right. Now, before I give my prediction, you had sent me your predictions for the whole shebang. So I'm curious to see if your prediction will stay the same, because Cloud9 versus CLG was one of the games you sent me. But so going into the Cloud9 versus CLG matchup, like I said, I think these are the two closest teams. Like, this is going to be the closest series, probably the best series we'll get, in my opinion, in the whole playoffs here. Now I know Nick here is going with his CLG 3-2 pick, and I think that's a pretty good pick, but I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to go Cloud9 3-2. And the reason is, I think CLG they've really burst onto the scene here, but I think the experience of the Cloud9 members and just I, I think over a 5-game series, I trust them more to pull out that 5th game. Like if we're gonna get into a decisive 5th game, and I'm like, who do I want to win that 1-game series? I think I'm gonna go Cloud9. And last split, in the spring split, I honestly thought Cloud9 was the second best team, and then they fell in that reverse sweep to TSM. And once again, I just think they're slightly better. Niski has had a great split. I think Svenskeren is a good player, like one of the elite junglers right now in the LCS. And you could say the same thing about Wiggly, but I just with Svenskeren's been there, done that, right? And Licorice versus Ruin to me is going to be a big matchup to kind of highlight and look at. Ruin had a good series versus Optic, but I don't think that happens against Licorice. Licorice has proven to be a bully. Even against good players, he's a bully. And I think that's going to be a definite advantage for Cloud9. So yeah, I think this, like I said, I think this is the closest. I think it could go either way. But if I have to pick we're into game 5, Reaper on one side of the stage, Weldon on the other, and Zix is over there, and who's gonna pull it out, right? I'm taking Reaper and Cloud9. That's who I'm taking for that 5th game.
Okay. I have one question on that. If you're going to 5 games in a row, does Licorice's health hold up?
Oh, I think so, because he scrims that much.
Dude, if he needs to go get a cortisone shot, he'll get a cortisone.
Yeah, right. He's in the back. Reaper will get him through that game 5.
Yeah, he'll have him play something that's very.
As somebody I can tell you from playing traditional sports, right? Like even if you're sick, if you get into like a elimination game, like game 5, it's for all the marbles, right? That adrenaline shot kicks in, and he will be good to go.
Yeah.
Like he will be fine.
All right.
Yeah, I would be shocked if he doesn't play every game. Honestly, but I don't remember what I picked. Honestly, I do remember doing it completely. Like I wasn't drunk or anything. I was just doing stuff out in Vegas. I will say that I think
you must have been drunk because you went 3-1 TSM.
Stop. We thought that it could have been that way. I figured Spica would play better than he did. Spica looked awful, dude. Awful. I think Cloud9's gonna take this one 3-2. I not only is it because I'm just hoping that this gives TSM like a real chance in the gauntlet, but I also think that in all honesty, right? I think that Cloud9 does have that X factor. They've shown it. They've been to Worlds. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a single player on CLG that has been to Worlds before. Biofrost.
Yeah, Biofrost has been there too. Did they go the year that they won MSI?
Yeah, they did. Or at least I'm pretty sure they did. But either way,
did Power of Evil go to Worlds?
Not that I'm aware of. If he did, it was a long time ago. But
I'm trying to think if it was in the EU LCS.
Well, it had to have been EU because he didn't go with NA. So I retract that. But either way, I think CLG doesn't have the recent experience. And Wiggly and Ruin definitely have not been to Worlds. And I think when you break it down position by position, right? I think you give top lane to Cloud9. Not that Ruin hasn't played well. He has been probably my personal biggest surprise of this entire split.
Yeah, I
thought he was going to be garbage. He had never done anything in any other place. I mean,
he didn't look that good at MSI either.
Yeah. Yeah, they just no thanks. I didn't think he was that good. Then I think you give the jungle advantage, while Wiggly has also been surprise, probably my second biggest surprise of the entire split, because I was telling Nick on the very first week of this show they should have literally just cut him because he was so bad last split. But you still give it to Svenskeren there. I think mid lane's a little bit more of a toss up, but you still give it to Niski. I think you give bot lane to CLG. And that one is still really close too. So even if you just break it down position by position, right? I think C9 definitely has it better. I think when you go coaches, I think Reaper still has the more experience. Weldon has been a huge surprise. If he doesn't win coach of the split, then I think that this thing is rigged, and I'll find who I need to find and tell them that they're wrong. But I think when you really look at it, I think that this is going to be a great matchup. I think C9 are going to surprise a lot of people, and I think they're going to come out, and I think they are going to go to a game 5. And I do think, like you talked about, Chris, I think they're going to win. I will go a little further, and I will say I bet you game 5 is handily in Cloud9's favor. I think that they will just play an incredible macro game. They'll get the kills where they need to. They know where to push their advantages, and I think that they will win 3-2. So yeah.
So
it sounds like either way, we're going to be on a call for that game 5.
Selfishly, I also would like Cloud9 to win, just because I think there'd be a little bit more energy in the finals. With Cloud9 has a bigger fan base than CLG does. Just for that reason, I'm kind of like, I'm rooting for them to win, because that St. Louis finals between TSM and TL was so electric, and I'm hoping we have sort of the same thing at this year. In case you were wondering, Robert, you picked 3-1 CLG. So
I've clearly jumped off that train.
Yes, after CLG's disappointing 3-0 of Optic Gaming, it has really changed your opinion.
That first game really scared me, man.
Yeah, it shook you.
Rob's biggest enemy is Rob from a week ago.
Dude, this happens more often than not. On a game like this, I'm gonna flip-flop pretty regularly.
I mean, I think that just goes to show how close it is.
Yeah, you can ask me tomorrow, and I'll be like, you know what? Maybe Ruin does figure it out. Maybe Licorice's hand is actually just broken, and he's not gonna play. Like, I don't know.
So, in general, I hate to be the actually guy, but Power Evil was at Worlds when they had that run against SKT, that 3-2,
where which team was he on?
Misfits.
With Misfits, where everyone thought Misfits was going to beat SKT.
I forgot about that.
I remember just freaking out that whole series. So
that was okay. I forgot about that.
And that is, because that was a far cry from the current team, back in a different league and everything. But yeah, that was the team with Afari and Maxlor and Hansama and Ignar, and that took SKT to the 5th game, which was insane at the time. So it's gonna be a good series. I think that's something we all agree on. But I think everyone in the world is gonna be disappointed if there's not a game 5. So
Silver Scrapes must be played.
Yes, we need it.
Can we have a little sidebar about whatever conditioning has happened to I get so excited whenever I hear that song. If I have it on a playlist and it comes on, I get adrenaline. I'm like, oh man, it's game 5.
I think it's really cool that they have a symbolic, or that they've attached it to that game 5 atmosphere. Yeah, I think it was really smart, and I love it. When it happened in the TL versus TSM game in St. Louis, I was losing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I got video.
That's one of my favorite esports moments I've ever had. So probably the favorite, just because it was awesome.
I as somebody who was also there, I can totally agree. Game 5s in the playoffs are the best. I've had too many games. I've been lucky enough to go to a lot of LCS finals, and I can tell you that it's very rare that we get a game 5 in the finals or even in the 3rd and 4th place games.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do, you gotta cherish them because they are really good games normally.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna head into our last bit here. Liquid versus Clutch. I don't think there's as much of a discussion or really much of anything that needs to be talked about here. Let's do our predictions, and then let's talk about a way where Clutch can maybe squeak it out. If you're picking Clutch, sorry, I maybe am doubting your thought processes here. I'm going to start with this one. I think it's a pretty quick 3-0 for Team Liquid. I do think Clutch is shown better things, but when it comes down to it, the the better team wins 99% of the time in this game. And I think that Team Liquid is that team. Um, I think a lot of the power that Clutch showed in their games against TSM were through the bot lane. I said this before, and I think that that's where Team Liquid shine. I think they'll shut down Cody Sun, or they'll find a way to do that. I think Lyra will get punished for his mistakes. I think Demonte will at least be held at bay, if not overwhelmed. And then I think Impact will have his way with Huni. So 3-0 for me for Liquid and Clutch. Heading right back the other way. Let's go with you, Chris.
So as the resident Team Liquid fan, I'm gonna go 3-1 Team Liquid, and the reason is, as a fan, I know better than to expect a clean 3-0, because that just doesn't seem to happen that often with them. Even though they did it to FlyQuest last time, I'm just expecting they're gonna drop a random game at some point here. They tend to do that where they just randomly lose a game because they do something stupid in the first 5 minutes and then they're just on the back foot, or whatever it might be. But and I think also part of that is because I want to give Clutch Gaming credit, and that they have made some major strides as the season has gone along. And I think that if they get a large enough advantage, they can win a game. So I'm going to go 3-1 Team Liquid. I think, we've talked about this. I think Team Liquid is the best team out there right now in the LCS. But I still expect that they'll drop one game.
Okay, Nick, what about you?
Pretty much everything that Chris just said. I think that it'll be 3-1 Team Liquid, and I think that Team Liquid is an amazing team. I think that their floor is like kind of above a lot of team ceilings. But I think that you don't get to the semifinals without being a good team that can compete, and I think that Clutch can have some pretty high highs to go with their pretty mediocre lows. And if those, cross at the right game where TL is, maybe trying a funny comp or do an early invade that they screw up, like you said, and
Clutch is having Heimerdinger in the first game, like that type of funny comp.
Yeah, it's something. And Team Liquid is one of the best teams probably in the world. And that doesn't mean they're infallible. That doesn't mean they don't lose games. So yeah, I think they'll probably drop one. I don't see them dropping two, and I don't see Clutch taking it overall. But yeah, I think it'll probably be 3-1.
I think you guys are out of your minds, but we will find out.
Wait! What was this? Wasn't this the Cody Sun defender? Where did this guy go? I thought that guy was amazing.
He is amazing, but there's a difference.
Not amazing enough to get them a single game.
No, God no. Dude, this just shows how little I think of TSM more than anything else. I still think Cody Sun's the third best AD carry in the league. I think it's Double Lift, Stix A, and then Cody Sun right now.
Yeah.
I think you could throw Arrow at fourth and blah blah after that pretty much for me.
Yeah.
I will say I think
no Bang.
No, not right now.
Depends on what year we're talking about, but
yeah, I think here's what I'll say. Right, here's what I will say. I think the reason is when the strengths for Clutch just hit so hard against even bigger strengths for TL. And so I guess I'll curtail that into how I can see them winning, because I think that's the only conversation that we can have at this point. I think it's really going to come down to Jensen not performing for me. That's the only way I really see TL winning, because I think that gives Demonte some power that he needs. I think that gives Lyra a little bit of extra leeway to roam around a little bit more, make more of an impact in the jungle. And I think that really then in turn messes with Impact's game as well. He's always solid. We know that. But he can get behind, and he does a lot of the time. And I think if you give Huni too much of a lead, he can make you pay for it. Now, he is also the guy that is most likely, along with Lyra, to make a mistake out of the 4 teams and most of the players in this whole thing. That said, I think the only path to victory for Clutch is to make sure that they protect Cody Sun, make sure they don't let Double Lift get ahead, and hope that Jensen just doesn't play well as he has been prone to do a couple times throughout this year since he's been on TL. For me, I think that's what it comes down to, and then hopefully Weldon can pull out some draft magic. That's really what Clutch needs, in my opinion. I don't see any way that they win through top lane. I don't see any way that they win through the jungle. So it's going to have to be through either mid lane or through bot lane. And bot lane is going to be really tough. So for me, mid lane's where it's going to just have to be. And Demonte is going to have to just be an absolute animal for them to make it happen.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. The combination of Jensen and Smithy versus Demonte and Lyra, I think, is very one-sided.
Well, I agree. Remember, though, we're talking about how can.
Right? No, I'm with you. I'm with you. Right? Like, but I'm looking for like potential weaknesses. The problem with Jensen is and we had this discussion. It's very hard to dominate Jensen, right? Like if you're looking for somebody to be your kind of, this is my winning point, this is how we're going to win the game, right? He doesn't really let you do that. Like, yeah, that's fine if you want to farm mid lane, right? But you're not going to solo kill me over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't happen with Jensen. He knows how to play safe. He knows how to play defensive. Here's what I'll say. He very rarely loses you the game. And to me, the big spotlight will be Lyra. If they are going to win the game, Lyra has to have it has to have a good series. In their first 2 games of the summer split, Smithy dominated Lyra in both of those games. He had a much better game than Lyra did. That was a big reason that Team Liquid 2-0'd them in the regular split, and that can't happen. Like Lyra had a great series against TSM. He was a big reason why. Granted, he was playing against Spica, but he has to continue that type of play if Clutch Gaming has any chance against Team Liquid. So for me, Lyra is the man that I'm watching. If he disappears, if he's not able to do it, I just don't see them winning anyway. But if he's able to hold Eve, maybe make some big plays here and there. I also think Team Liquid needs to be smart about their drafting. Just ban Kiana because you don't play it, and
Demonte will.
Yeah, like there's certain champions. Just don't let weird picks beat you, right? It's okay if you let them pick power picks like Aatrox or things like that, right? As long as things that you're not comfortable against don't beat you. So that's kind of my other point for Team Liquid is like I don't want to see Demonte on Kiana in any of the games. Not because I think that Demonte is, just this god player, right? But it is the type of champion that one play can win you the game. And I don't want Team Liquid to give them that type of opportunity. That's what I can see them doing. If Clutch Gaming is going to win, Lyra's got to do that, and they have to get, champions like Kiana on a Demonte where he can make these game-altering or one team fight changes that gives them this big mid-game advantage and that hopefully can push through to victories.
All right. I can definitely respect that. Nick, where are you at with this one? How can Clutch make it back in?
This is probably boring, but I think that a lot of it comes down to the draft. I mean, the amount of times that I see people give Huni Rumble and give Cody Sun Sivir, that's not something you want to do. That explosiveness, that damage from Huni, and that safety and scaling from Cody Sun, like that's dangerous for anyone. And this is one of those things where like I know that the coaches and the teams are much smarter about the game than I am. But to me, going into this, it's like, if you see this team ban those 2 champions, those are your first 2 bans every time. So I think it comes down to the draft. If they can pick a draft that scales better and then just stay safe, which we know they're pretty good at doing when they need to, if you can keep Doublelift from getting kills in the bot lane and just kind of scale up and wait till you outscale them because of the champion, that's a chance. And then, this might be, just an emotional thought, because as I've mentioned a while ago, I've always been like a big Huni fan. From back in the day when he was just popping off and killing whole teams from the top lane. Who knows? Maybe they go into a weird pocket pick and give him Riven and just like give him all the resources and hope that he can do it on his own. That might be something that's unpredictable enough for them to surprise him. But it would be very tough, but I don't think it's impossible, and I think a lot of it'll come down to the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of your points and scenarios are definitely interesting, and I think that I think if we look back on it, right, like you were talking about, Chris, I think Lyra does have to do something big to really make this happen. I also think, like you were saying, Nick, I think a lot of it has to do with their drafts as well. I mean, I think TSM, that might have been where they messed up as bad as anything.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching those drafts. Like, that's part of the reason why I didn't even watch the second game. I knew they were going to lose. You could literally tell they were going to lose when the draft was over. And if Clutch can pull it out, figure it out, and they can win in the draft phase, and they can make the plays through the jungle for me through the mid lane, then sure, they can pull it out. How likely is that to happen? Very, I don't know. I mean, I would say less than 5% potentially, honestly. Maybe that's not giving them enough credit, but I think what Chris was alluding to earlier, there's a pretty big difference between Team Liquid and C9 and CLG, let alone Clutch.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll see what happens there. We're a little over our hour as we normally are. We just have a lot to say. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about. We also got started a little bit late, so give us a break. And there's nobody on after us. So,
and
oh yeah, go.
Just one more thing that I think needs to be mentioned for this series that adds to the one-sidedness is that TL got to pick who they play, and so that adds a little bit to like their comfort level. They know what they're doing. They know the ways that they're going to win this game. You're not gonna while I think they are the worst team and kind of the obvious choice, I think that is the case for a reason, and part of that is that they see the weaknesses and they know how to exploit them. So. I think that needs to be factored in too.
Okay, good stuff. No, I think that's definitely worth thinking about. I would have been surprised if TL had not picked whoever won that.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't going to pick CLG, right?
So, yeah, they're not going to pick either Cloud9 or CLG. So not a huge surprise there. So you've heard our picks now. You've heard our reasonings behind them. We've got some pretty incredible games. You'll likely see all three of us, and maybe we'll do a special out in Detroit. We will all be there. We're pretty excited about it. So, make sure to, keep a lookout for Chris's content, for our content. We'll be able to keep you guys up to date on pretty much everything that's going to be going on in League of Legends in the LCS. We've got some incredible games. Make sure you go watch them. Please go watch them. They're really going to probably blow your mind, especially that first one. Second one, TL is going to win 3-0, and I'm going to look like a genius. So we'll see what happens here. We're going to have a good time. We will be live next week. Likely the three of us again, as it is playoff time. Yeah, do you guys have any final words for the fans?
No, like I said, we're probably all going to be at the LCS finals in Detroit. So, hopefully we can put something special together for that, or I don't know. I'm going to be chilling, hanging out. So if you want to see me or any of the guys, just let us know.
Yeah, please just hit us up. We'll be happy to hang out. So, for Chris and Nick, I'm Robert, and from our house years, we'll catch you next time.
Have a good night.